Welcome back, everyone. It's time for another case from the dark side. I'm your host, Sherry. Today's case is about a husband and wife who seem to have it all: success, an oceanview home, 5 beautiful children, and a net worth of $80 million. Until February 9th, 2014, when they were gunned down in their bedroom while they slept. The investigation revealed some shocking news that left their family and friends stunned. This is episode 75, The Case of the Sachs Family. This story takes place in 2014. I'd give anything to go back to that year. There was the disappearance of Malaysia Airline Flight 370. It was the year Apple Pay was rolled out. Jay Leno hosted The Tonight Show for the last time. Minimum wage was $7.25 an hour. More than 20 women came forward claiming they were sexually assaulted by the legendary actor Bill Cosby. Taylor Swift accidentally released a song that was 8 seconds of white noise on iTunes, and people paid $1.29 for it. It was the top downloaded song in Canada before it was caught and removed. And lastly, CVS stopped selling tobacco products. Andra and Brad Sachs were a couple that lived in Orange County, California. Andra is 54 and Brad is 57. Together they had 5 children. They had a 21-year-old son named Miles, a 19-year-old son named Ashton. Both of these boys live in Seattle, Washington, and attend college there. Then they had a 17-year-old daughter named Alexis and a 15-year-old daughter named Lana. And lastly, they had an 8-year-old son named Landon. So again, the 2 older boys, Miles and Ashton, they live 1,200 miles away in Washington, and the 2 teenage girls and 8-year-old Landon live with them in their home in California. Brad and Andra met at a tech trade show back in 1990. Brad was selling a semiconductor chip at one table, and Andra was selling the competitive version at another table. They were rivals, but something clicked, and they began dating. They ended up getting married in this beautiful, lavish ceremony in 1991. Andra and Brad were both very successful people, both entrepreneurs who made a lot of money. They saw a lot of promise in one another. Andra grew up in College Park, Maryland. Then, when she was 15, her dad moved the family to San Diego, California. There was a time during this move that her dad ran low on cash and for a couple weeks struggled to feed her and her brothers and sisters. Andra told her sister during this time that she would never allow that to ever happen again in her life. She would never worry about being hungry again, and she didn't. In the early 1980s, Andra graduated from Caltech with a degree in business. She started working for a company that sold integrated computer circuits. Then she branches out on her own and started her own business selling semiconductors. Because she is a woman and a minority as a Jewish woman, she got more government contracts than her competitors. She is described as being brilliant but a ruthless businesswoman. When it comes to business, you don't want to get on her bad side. She becomes very different. One of her associates was quoted as saying, "Don't piss her off, don't lie to her. She was a straight shooter. If you tried to finagle her, she'd be all over you fast." Andra had a good sense of market timing and avoided debt by paying cash for all her properties. Now, about her husband Brad, he loves to surf, he plays the drums, he wears sandals everywhere. He's very laid back and easygoing. People say they've never even heard him raise his voice, unlike Andra. He and Andra ran a telemarketing company, a wine bar on the beach, and in 1998 they founded the company Flashcom. It's an internet DSL company. This was their big project, and suddenly millions of dollars are rolling in very fast. This husband and wife team are business partners, and it's working well for them, and they are living the good life along with their children. In 2012, Brad was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. The disease hit him hard, and at only 55 years old, he was feeling the effects of it, and his condition was getting worse. Andrea even spoke about selling their current home to move into a smaller house so that Brad could have everything on one floor and he wouldn't have to climb steps in the house. So let's jump forward to 2014. The family lives together in a beautiful home in a city in California named San Juan Capistrano. It's located in South Orange County. The average house in this area is $1.3 million. Andrea and Brad had bought their current home 5 years earlier in 2009 for $2.5 million. It was originally $3.6 million, but because it was a foreclosure, they got a lot knocked off the price. The house is 9,200 square foot. Entire walls are just windows where you can see the Pacific Ocean. It has a theater, a wet bar, a temperature-controlled wine cellar, a gym, a sauna, and a steam room. Outside was a pool house with office space, patios, a spa, a koi pond, and waterfalls. Sounds like they got a good deal. I saw photos, and it's truly one of the most beautiful homes I've ever seen. Everything looks super modern. It's the night of February 9th, 2014, just before 2 a.m. It's California and the temperature is 60 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees Celsius outside. The family is asleep in their house. 15-year-old Lana has the family dogs in her bedroom with the door closed so they can't get out and wander the house at night. She is awoken to the sound of shots coming from somewhere else in the house. 17-year-old Alexis is awoken to a dark, shadowy intruder in her doorway, firing his gun at her. A bullet whizzes past her head, sparing her life. Both girls are hiding in their bedrooms until they hear the sound of their 8-year-old little brother Landon crying out in pain. The intruder has now gone away into the night. The girls run to Landon, who had been shot but was clinging to life. They go into their parents' room where they find their mom, 54-year-old Andra, and their dad, 57-year-old Brad, deceased. They were sleeping and had each been shot multiple times with a semi-automatic rifle. There's gunshots all over this room. There were shell casings along the floor. Andra was hit 10 times and Brad was hit 12 times. The girls call 911. They say their parents have been shot and little brother as well, but he is still breathing and he can't feel his legs. Ambulances arrive and take the bodies out, and the third ambulance transported Landon to the hospital. He is hanging on but needs medical attention fast. This shocked their community. They had never had anything like this happen in this ritzy area. The police say they get occasional calls for domestic disputes in the area, but that's about it. They've never had a double homicide. According to a report by People Investigates, each one of these houses were on 1 to 2 acres of land. These are mansions, so there's tons of privacy. The two older boys are away in college in Washington, so 2 detectives call them separately since they don't live together. Miles and Ashton are both informed their parents have been killed, and both were hysterical. It's the worst feeling having to give news like that over the phone, especially when you're 1,200 miles away. That's an 18-hour drive. The boys will catch an airplane and be right there. News has spread the next morning that the couple were killed. Nothing was stolen from the house, so this wasn't a robbery gone bad. They were killed while they slept, only for the reason that someone wanted them dead. A neighbor named Kelly Winterbottom tells KCAL News that she was Andra's best friend and had seen her the night before. She says, "I couldn't imagine anybody wanting to hurt them for anything." Some tenants who rent commercial properties from them had a different version to tell. They say Brad and Andra were disliked by many people and seen as sharks or people who were driven by money no matter who gets hurt. Another neighbor said, "We're here for the kids. We love them. They were a wonderful, wonderful family." News organizations speculated that these killings were from their business dealings. Meanwhile, Miles and Ashton have each returned to California and they are holding watch over their little brother in the hospital. Doctors expect him to live, but say he will forever be paralyzed from the waist down. A bullet had pierced his spinal cord and was lodged in his vertebrae. 19-year-old Ashton, who was the closest to Landon, would sometimes relieve the nurses and watch his brother in the hospital bed to give them breaks. There's lots of prayers and tears going on during this time, and it's about to get even worse with their parents' funeral coming up in a few days. This was a large double funeral service. All of their children attended except Landon, who was still in the hospital. Ashton gave the eulogy, and through his tears he said, "I really do believe that they will continue to guide me throughout life." He described them as the perfect mom and dad, also saying, "Dad did everything so well. He was so well-rounded. He was the only person I've ever met who could do just as much as my mom. They were just absolutely perfect for each other. They were the perfect team." Speaking of his mom, he said, "She was just an incredible person, and she did more in her 54 years than most people can do in 10 lifetimes." One of Andra's close friends told the crowd a story about Andra coming from humble beginnings and how she grew up poor. She worked selling potato chips for Lay's, and then she moved to selling computer chips. She wanted this deal that was available to buy a surplus of computer chips, so she flew across the country to the CEO's house and showed up on his doorstep. She ended up getting the deal, and the rest was history. Together, Andra and Brad had built an empire. All of the kids moved into a different house. They don't want to go back to the house where their parents were killed for obvious reasons. Since Miles is 21 and Ashton is 19, they applied for guardianship of Landon and their two sisters who are in high school. This family had no shortage of money, so that's not an issue for them to survive without their parents. Andra and Brad had a net worth of $80 million. Detectives know they have their work cut out for them. This couple has a long list of enemies. They need to start with Miles and Ashton since they're the oldest and the most knowledgeable about their parents' businesses and properties. But first, the two of them need to be cleared so that they can continue, and this is standard operating procedure. Both explain they live in Seattle, Washington, separately, where they attend college. They were asked if either would have a reason to want their parents dead, and both said no. They were their life and their source of income. Ashton is described as extremely smart. He's a straight-A student and very bright, and Miles is more laid back, like his dad. These are wealthy kids who have never been exposed to police and investigations, and they're trying their best to help and deal with the death of their parents and the permanent disability of their little brother, who was just a perfectly functioning 8-year-old boy, and now he'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. Plus, they have two teenage sisters, Lana and Alexis, that lost their parents as well. It's a lot on these two boys at 19 and 21. They explain that their mom and dad have people who may have had it out for them. In fact, they gave them 2 pages of names of people who may need to be looked into. Some of the stuff I've read that people have said about them after their death was absolutely horrible, and I won't repeat it out of respect for these victims, but they were bad. Even praising that they were dead. They were hated by a lot of people, mostly tenants of their commercial properties. So Andra had more enemies than Brad. One instance in particular was in regards to the company that they both had started called Flashcom, the internet service provider. Well, people wanted Andra off the board of directors since she was accused of being unagreeable and irrational. The board met with her and she was voted out of the company. So she agreed to step down, but not for less than a payout of $9 million. Flashcom agrees to this and gives Andra her payout in order to make her go away, but shortly after this, the company went bankrupt. So these business partners were going to sue her to get their $9 million back because Andra is not going to give it back to them. The lawsuit was still pending at the time of the murders, and friends say Andra was extremely worried about this lawsuit. In talking with the folks involved in the lawsuit, it was determined that these folks would not have benefited from their deaths. Without them alive, they don't get anything. So it's unlikely that it was a hit job from one of them. No one involved would benefit from their death financially. If they were alive, the lawsuit could have proceeded and they could have gained financially from it, and they likely would have won. The other enemies, such as their tenants of commercial properties, are looked into. The problem is that the gun was fired over 24 times in that house. This seems like a very personal killing or a crime of passion, but a huge piece is why was Landon shot and Alexis shot at? Paid hitmen are going to shoot at each subject they are hired to kill, and that's it. They're not coming into your house with a 22 and firing all over the place and shooting at your kids. Detectives are forced to look into other options at this point. They need a complete history of Brad and Andra. They learn that not everything is as it seemed. For starters, Brad and Andra are divorced. They had been divorced for the last 14 years, but living together. We learned that the couple had another child in their life, a daughter named Sabrina. And back in 1999, Sabrina was only 18 months old. One day, Brad is away on business and Andra is at work. They had a nanny who took care of the kids. The nanny was busy doing something else with the other kids, and Sabrina wandered off. The family had a pool, and 18-month-old Sabrina fell into it and drowned. The family was absolutely rocked and devastated, and they never went back into that house again. In fact, they just kind of stopped talking about Sabrina and tried to move on quickly. And in 2000, the tensions were rising in their marriage. Neither one wants to attend therapy or couples counseling, and they instead decide to get divorced. Brad even got a settlement of $800,000 from one of their properties. They remained business partners during the separation period. So they hadn't been separated very long when Brad moves on with another woman. Friends and family found this strange as the divorce wasn't even finalized, and this really pissed off Andra. As much of a hard ass as she was in the business world, she was devastated personally, even calling the woman and telling her to stay away from Brad. The divorce had only been finalized for 2 weeks when they got back together and Brad moved back in. It's like, what was the point of all that? Andra told one friend that the divorce had given her complete financial separation from him. She will never, ever have to share her money with a man ever again. Although living together again, Brad and Andra never remarried. In 2007, just 7 years before the killings, Andra and Brad decided they wanted to add to their children. They adopted 2 children from Russia. A brother and sister named Lana and Landon, who were 9 and 2 at the time. Lana and Landon, although they were not their biological children, they were treated exactly the same as the other kids. The Sachs adopted these kids to give them a better life, and I feel awful for Landon knowing that he and his sister came to America and this is what happened to them. Lana was the only person not fired at, but still heavily traumatized by what happened that night. Her parents were killed, her brother was shot and paralyzed, and her sister was shot at but missed. I wonder if she was spared because she had her bedroom door closed with the dogs inside. Plus, she was on a different floor of the house. A break in the case would come a few weeks after the murders. A neighbor of the Sachs tells police he had a security camera installed on his house and was able to see someone pulling into the Sachs driveway in the middle of the night on February the 9th. The detectives review the footage and see the car is a white Prius, but they can't see the tag number or the driver, so they reviewed the street cameras in the area after the murder occurred. This is like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, they spot a white Prius speeding out of the area and flying down the highway. This has to be the killer because it looked exactly like the car that was in their driveway at the time of the murders, and now it's hauling ass out of town. Police know exactly who owns a white Prius, so they do some checking around into this person's cell phone records. This person, who police believe killed Brad and Andra and wounded 8-year-old Landon, well, he owns a white Prius, and his cell phone records showed that he was in the area of the house at the time of the murders. It was Ashton Sachs, their 19-year-old son. But Ashton was supposed to be in Seattle, 1,200 miles away. So police traced the Prius to an auto transport company in Seattle. The car was picked up the morning after the murders at a commercial property owned by his parents. It was transported to Seattle, where it is sitting in storage. The detectives in California investigating the murder get in touch with the Seattle Police Department 18 hours away, and they issue a search warrant for the car. The owner of the transport company leads them to the Prius, and the trunk is pried open. The detectives in California, who is doing the investigation, gets a call from one of the officers at the Seattle Police Department. And the first words out of his mouth were "Merry Christmas." Inside the trunk, they find a .22 rifle and ammunition. This was the murder weapon. Ashton killed his parents and then shot and paralyzed his little brother that he was so close to and even held a fucking vigil at his hospital bed. Then he gave eulogies at their service and played this role as the family's patriarch. Ashton's parents had bought him that white Prius that he used in the murders. Plus, they paid $233,000 in cash for Ashton to have his own condo in Seattle. Being 19 years old and having your own paid-off house, a really nice one at that, you would think Ashton would be grateful, but he was actually pissed off when his parents told him he needed to get a part-time job while in college and start earning his own money. There's a lot of missing links here. On the surface, we see a spoiled rich kid who seems narcissistic. One who has never been in any trouble. He was living 1,200 miles from home but had all the resources he could have ever wanted. We don't see a motive here, and investigators aren't going to get much help from Ashton. In his first interview the day after the murder, when he had to get cleared, he stated that he went to school, came home, played video games, and stayed in his condo for the rest of the day. But now detectives had evidence that showed Ashton was lying. They had discovered that during that time, Ashton drove his Prius 18 hours to his parents' house and then contacted a transport company to pick up his car and bring it back to Seattle with the rifle and ammunition still in the trunk, and then he flew back to his house just hours after the shooting. He awaits the call from police notifying him that his parents were killed. He then acted devastated on the phone and crying. He catches a plane back to California to be with the rest of his family. Going back to the night of the murders real quickly, another piece that makes sense is that this house was huge. If you or I walked into it in the middle of the night, we would be lost. The killer knew which bedrooms everyone was in. He knew the layout of the house. On March 6, 2014, this is less than a month after the murders, police arrive at Ashton's home in California. He's there with his brother Miles. They say they're there to talk about the murders. It's just something quick and informal. Miles had somewhere to be, and police said he wasn't needed right now, so he left. They have Ashton alone, and they ask him, "Once we catch the murderer, what do you think should happen to him?" Ashton says, well, he needs to go away for the rest of his life. They need to lock him in a story, so he's not confessing, and they know that. They know they're not going to get a confession, so they want him to say that he's innocent, because that way they can use this in court. They need to kind of finalize his stance, so they ask him again, "Ashton, were you in Washington at the time of the murders?" Final answer. He says yes, he was in Washington. They ask him when the last time he was at John Wayne Airport, and he said when he flew down after he was informed about the murders. Ashton is getting nervous and suddenly stops talking. He knows detectives know more than what they're telling him. So they tell him that they have the murder weapon and it was located in his trunk. Ashton offered no resistance and detectives drive him to the police headquarters. He didn't even ask for a lawyer. They ask him when he put that rifle in his car and drove 18 hours to his parents' house, what were you thinking? Ashton said he planned on killing his parents and then killing himself. They learn he drove straight through the whole way. He hadn't slept in days prior. Then he got in his car and drove the 18 hours. This reminds me back to the Rico Harris case, except Rico hadn't slept and was driving California to Seattle. Ashton was in such a hurry that he actually urinated on himself on the way there. He says at 2 a.m. he pulled up to the house, he unloaded the gun from the trunk, and then everyone was asleep when he went inside. He waited outside his parents' bedroom for 15 minutes, thinking about if he was really going to do it. That statement alone just proves premeditation, and that's going to look bad when he has his day in court. He had a choice that he stewed over for 15 minutes. He said he shot his parents first, and then he walked to Landon's room and fired at him. Then he went to Alexis's room and shot at her, and then he fled the house. He drove to one of his parents' properties and called a transport service to pick up his car and take it back to Seattle. Then he went to John Wayne Airport and caught a plane home. Ashton was charged with 2 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder for shooting Landon and 1 count of attempted murder for shooting at his sister Alexis. The family is shocked, especially Miles, who was super close to Ashton in age. Ashton was described by his aunts as being super smart and caring and never having any issues. He was even going to nursing homes to teach the residents how to use computers. But others say he was the opposite. Some say he was constantly terrorizing his brothers and sisters by playing practical jokes on them. He logged more than 1,800 hours playing League of Legends online. He once took a breakup with his girlfriend so bad that he tried to overdose on pills. Ashton was asked why he did it. He says he was fucked up by his parents. Those are his words. Ashton told investigators he felt his parents didn't trust him and that he was the least favorite out of the family. He says Miles was their favorite child. He said his mom didn't care about him and his dad just didn't like him. He says he dropped out of college and never told his parents. He just spends his days smoking pot and playing video games. Ashton said he was suicidal and wanted to kill himself in the hallway after he killed his parents. They asked him, well, why were you wearing latex gloves during the killing? And he said it was so he didn't leave any fingerprints. This isn't something that a suicidal person would say. If he planned on shooting himself immediately afterwards, who cares if he left fingerprints? They're going to find a whole-ass body there. Ashton was known to have a lot of knowledge about Eric and Lyle Menendez, two young men who killed their parents back in 1989. You can go back about 20 episodes when I covered their case if you want to get the story. Ashton had done a paper in college on Eric and Lyle Menendez and called his parents to tell them that he got an A on it. But Ashton was getting A's all the time, so it makes you wonder why he felt the need to call and brag about this particular paper and not any others. Ashton basically says that his only motive was that he felt neglected by his parents, even after all they did for him. His actions, he claimed, were not motivated by money. Money was not an issue for him, and the detectives agreed with this as well. They don't think that he killed for money. His parents gave him tons of money. All he had to do was ask. He doesn't know why he did it. He just made a bad choice. In September 2016, Ashton's trial was delayed because in a strange turn of events, Ashton got rid of his lawyers. He changed his not guilty plea and agreed to represent himself, and he entered a guilty plea for 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. This was great because it spared the family having to go through some long trial, which would involve Landon having to go on the stand, and he just says, I'm guilty, I did it, I'm sorry, just give me my sentence. None of Ashton's family attended the sentencing except for one aunt, who was Brad's sister. She gave a victim impact statement. She spoke to Ashton in court, telling him to look at what he's done to Landon, who will never walk again. She spoke of his hypocrisy, that he gave their eulogies and was a pallbearer at their service. She ended it by telling him that she cannot forgive him. Prosecutor Mike Murray told the judge, the defendant is a sociopath. He has no remorse, no empathy. All he cares about is himself. He is a manipulator. He also said Ashton had every opportunity to lead a productive life, and I agree. This kid had more opportunities in life than 99% of the population. A representative read a statement from Miles in his absence. He didn't say one word about his brother. He just thanked the police and the detectives. Ashton never gave a public statement addressing the motive for why he killed his parents. All we have to go on is what the detectives heard in the interview room, that he felt like they didn't like him. Judge Greg Prickett sentenced Ashton to 4 consecutive life sentences plus 100 years. He would have to be around 300 years old before he could get out. The judge explained that the reason for such a harsh sentence is because of the brutality. He shot his father 10 times and his mother 12 times. Then he shot his innocent 8-year-old brother, who is now paralyzed from the waist down. Then he shot at his sister, but thank God he missed and she was unharmed. The bullet literally went right past her head. Ashton is currently 29 years old and incarcerated at the Chuckawalla Valley State Prison in California. I found his profile on this Write-A-Prisoner website where you can become pen pals with a prisoner. Here is what he wrote in his biography. Hi, I'm a Caucasian male standing at 6 foot with an athletic build who has a witty sense of humor and a positive mindset. I'm a carefree, easygoing person who loves learning new things and lives life with an open mind. I love playing sports, primarily soccer. I thrive on friendly competition, enjoying the ability to push myself to grow as a person. Education is an important value of mine. I'm currently working towards a degree. I'm a social person who enjoys the sunshine. Cooking is something I enjoy doing, creating delicious dishes that I can share with those close to me. In my free time, I enjoy reading. Books that particularly interest me are nonfiction. Then he ends with the process of how to contact him if you want to write. According to an article written in 2020 by Kriti Mehrotra, I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, Kriti Mehrotra. Over the years, whenever Ashton has been asked why he did what he did, his answer has always been the same: I don't know. I want to talk about the other siblings today. They do not speak of Ashton or the murders or anything that happened that night. They have chosen to just remember their parents as they were before. Ashton is non existent to them. Miles was only 21 at the time of his parents' death. He is 31 years old today and has guardianship of Landon and has been the family's patriarch. He took over some of their parents' businesses, and Miles has faced more hardships in his life. In 2022, Miles was informed by his doctor that he is experiencing kidney failure and he's running out of time. He was told that if he goes on dialysis, his prognosis is much worse. Instead, he just needs a kidney transplant immediately. Miles says that more importantly than a donor, he is just most concerned about his little brother Landon and sisters Lana and Alexis. He doesn't want them to have to face the world without him. I can't find much info on Miles' journey to find a matching kidney donor. It makes me wonder if anyone reached out to Ashton about donating one of his kidneys. That's if Miles would even accept it. Landon is 18 today. Last year he was a senior in high school, and Landon is a competitive athlete. He is a wheelchair tennis player and was ranked 17th in the nation. He got a D1 scholarship into Arizona State University on his tennis playing. I watched a news clip of him playing and signing his acceptance letter. He is fast and good on the court. He was even playing national competitions. He says he'll play college tennis this year and then eventually wants to play the U.S. Open and then Wimbledon. He says his drive comes from wanting to make his parents proud. If anyone asks Landon about his spinal cord injury, he just refers to it as the result of an accident. Again, they don't speak anymore of Ashton. Rest in peace to both Brad and Andra Sachs, who would be so proud today of their other children if they were still here. That's it for this week, and I'll see you all again soon. Take care, and much love to you all.